Luana Lopes Lara, Kalshi co-founder and COO, now the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. Raised in Brazil, she's a former ballet dancer who traded the stage for MIT, earning degrees in computer science and mathematics and a master's focusing on research in cognitive science. Trained in discipline, she took her drive to Wall Street and then co-founded a startup that most people said wouldn't work. Kalshi, now one of the world's top prediction markets where you don't trade stocks, you trade on what happens next. As CNBC Changemaker, Luana Lopes Lara is in the Changemakers and Power Players spotlight. Luana, thank you so much for joining us for this Changemakers and Power Players podcast, and congratulations on being named a 2026 CNBC Changemaker.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the award. It's an honor.
So, Luana, I want to go back to the beginning of Kalshi. I remember hearing about Kalshi in the early days from one of your early investors, Ali Partovi, and he was telling me this is a company that doesn't have regulatory approval yet. They have a lot of challenges ahead, but this is going to be the next big thing. And I remember thinking, why would this new way of predicting the future turn into this huge business? And it absolutely has. It seems to be changing everything. So take us back. What is the origin of Kalshi? What was the original idea?
Yeah, that is a great question. And indeed, it was many, many years of it looking like it was going nowhere up until 2 years ago that we really started growing a lot. But it really started when me and my co-founder, we were working on Wall Street. And what we learned at the time is that most trading happens when you have some view about the future, and then you try to put it in the markets. But there isn't a very good way to do it. So an example, for example, is when Brexit was happening in 2016, a lot of people were trying to get exposure to it, but there wasn't a good way. You try to build a portfolio of maybe shorting the pound, go long some European stocks, but there wasn't a direct way to just get exposure about what was going to happen. And we saw the behavior happen a lot of times. So we saw it again when the Trump 2016 election, that there wasn't a way to really get exposure to it. So people were trying to short the S&P and try to find a play in the markets. But what we wanted to do from that moment on was we want to create an exchange where people can trade directly on what's going to happen in the future and just hold exposure, just hold a share of what's going to happen in the future. And of course, the big question at the time, the big problem was how do we make this in a legal way, because it was illegal in the US. So we went through a 4-year regulatory journey to convince the regulators that these markets are good, that they should be regulated and legal in the US for us to be able to launch and go from there. And yeah, in the past 2 years since we started listing the election markets, it started growing so much, and it's been a blessing.
You and your co-founder, Tarek, had known each other from MIT. Had you always talked about starting a business together? Is this something that you were looking to find an opportunity to work together?
Not at all, actually. So Tarek and I, we were very close friends because we had a lot of very similar interests. So we took a lot of classes together. We actually did a lot of internships together. But neither of us was like, that's it, my mission, and I want to start a company, and that's what I want to do. It really was the idea of prediction markets and how important we think they are that pulled us into doing it. And I think it was very organic for how we started working together and all of that. But we're very, very close friends since the very first year of college. So it was very easy to work together.
Do you remember the conversation where you realized this was something that you were going to pursue? Were you having dinner? Were you going on a walk? What was the light bulb moment?
Yeah, that is a great question. It was very organic for us because we started by just researching it more. We're like, why doesn't this exist? Are there alternatives? We learned about Predicted that existed as kind of like a nonprofit research side. And then we learned about companies that tried to do this offshore in an illegal way. And there was we started almost pulling all-nighters, just doing research on this while we were doing our masters. And we were just like, what's happening? What about this? And what what about this angle? What if it's options? What if it's this structure? And it was really in the end of these all-nighters that we were at MIT at the time that we were like, this is why don't we just try to do this? Because it's we're putting so much time into this, and at some point we should just probably try and see if we can get this somewhere. It was more of a feeling that if it's someone that's gonna make this happen, it should be us. We've been really, really upset if it wasn't us and someone else did this because we were so in love with this problem and this idea. But at the time, we didn't really know what to do, right? Because what we were doing, we were very much in the track for going to a finance role. And we really just didn't know anything about starting companies. So we applied to go to the Y Combinator hackathon. And that was kind of our first little, like, let's just go and see if we win the hackathon. If we don't win the hackathon, it might be a sign that this is not going to go anywhere. And we ended up going to San Francisco, go to the hackathon. We won it, got into Y Combinator, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And so when you say the rest is history, was it really Y Combinator was a make or break moment? You knew if it worked at Y Combinator, then you had a shot?
It's funny because I think before we started at Y Combinator, we thought it was. It's like, it's fun. I think it's always like the next step is always seems like, oh, if we do that, we make it, right? Like if we get into YC, we made it. If we raise a round at the end of YC, we made it. If we raise our Series A, if we get Sequoia as an investor. And I think one of the things that I've matured a lot from where we started, same with Tarek, is realizing that there isn't a making it. There's just like new challenges and new problems that you need to solve for the company to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But at the time, for sure, like when we were YC, it was just like, if it works out at the end, if we raise some money at demo day, we're good to go.
Well, one thing that was so interesting to me about your business is that you weren't iterating on something that already existed. You really, or at least from my perspective, you wanted to do something new. Maybe from your perspective, because you had done all this work in finance, for you it did feel iterative. But this concept was so disruptive. Do you think you were aware of the challenges you were going to face in bringing this to the mainstream?
I think partially. One of the reasons I think Kalshi ended up working out was because of how naive we were and how stubborn we were. We were very naive to think that, look, we're smart kids from MIT. We solve hard math problems. We got to figure out this like regulatory government problem. And I think that being very naive, we talked to a lot of people at the time and they were like, that's impossible. The odds are like lower than 1%. You're never going to make that happen. I think it's being naive and like, oh, but maybe they just didn't try that hard, or maybe they didn't understand this. I think being naive really helped us. The other side, I think, is being very stubborn. We really just don't take no for an answer in a lot of ways. So when we got feedback from the regulator of like, oh, these markets might be easy to manipulate, or there's an issue with this part of the plan, we would just, when we disagreed with them, we would just go back and like do a lot of data analysis, legal research, all of those things to prove that we were right. And so it was a mix of those two things. So I don't think we knew how hard it was going to be, but in a lot of ways, I think not knowing how hard it was going to be was kind of like what kept us going and getting there. In the beginning, we did think that we would be able to be alive in 6 months, and it did end up taking 4 years. So we were very wrong there on the time estimate, but yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So many founders have told me that their naivete about the challenges of the market ended up being a huge advantage because it enabled them to be more ambitious. I was so fascinated to read that your background is as a ballet dancer, and you had a pretty serious career as a professional dancer before you moved into this world of tech and entrepreneurship. As a dancer myself, far less serious than you, I do think having that experience in ballet and in performance did influence the way I do my job and how hard I am on myself. And I'm curious how your journey as a dancer influenced how you got to where you are now.
It influenced so much. And I think it's one of the reasons that Kalshi is where it is now. I think when I think about it, I think there's two sides to it. I think one is a discipline, right? It's about every day going there, doing your job, even if you got like terrible news from the regulator the day before that, it's going to be another 6 months or they need this. It's about going, it doesn't matter, you're there at 9 a.m. or like 8 a.m. and you're working the whole day and you have a plan and you have like, this is the next milestone, this is what we need to do. And kind of dealing with adversity and being able to keep your discipline, which is very much like coming from ballet. Like in ballet, even if you're injured, it doesn't really matter. You need to go and you need to train, otherwise you're going to lose your spot. And the other side of it is really the delayed gratification, right? Like ballet is about practicing for a year to have 1 hour on stage. And it's about dealing with that. I really want to get to that 1 hour, so I'll do what I need to do. And I want that 1 hour to be the absolute best. And it also helps a lot, like almost psychologically dealing with the fact that there were so many delays with what we do and dealing with moments that, the company is going through a lot of issues. Like we had, for example, a big lawsuit against the government to list election markets. And that was a very hard moment for us on like waiting and not knowing what's going to happen and being out of control, not having control over the situation. And having that kind of like background of understanding delayed gratification and being okay with that, was very good at leading, kind of helping lead the company in a direction where everyone was motivated and coming to work and excited. So ballet definitely has helped a lot in being an integral part of Kalshi.
And so when you're growing up, you grew up in Brazil, and you must have been training from a very young age. Did you always want to be a professional dancer, or was your aspiration to go off to MIT?
Yeah, it's a funny question. In Brazil, at least, like, look, I'm 29 now, so at least when I was younger, it was like every single girl that's around 2, 3 years old, the parents put them in ballet class, and I was just very, very lucky, honestly, that I just loved it from the start. So I was like very, very young, and I was already like loving. I want to go to more ballet classes, more dance classes, take other classes like jazz and tap and all those things, that I wanted to do. And I think with me, it's always been about trying to be the best at whatever I'm doing and trying to be the best version of what I can be. But it wasn't really about being like the best like a professional ballet dancer. I had this paper next to my bed when I was little that would write names of famous people or important people that one day I wanted to be like, and I would learn about in school. So I would learn about Alexander the Great, and I would go and write Alexander the Great. I would learn about Churchill, and I would do the same. And for me, it was like, I want to one day, make or change something, make something that is like, I don't think I can do anything that's in the scale of those people, but at least like something that, I mean, I'm proud of, and that I pushed myself, and that I feel like is an achievement I was proud of. So ballet was kind of in the context of that. It was just something I loved and that I wanted to be the best at and going to the best places. But I've always, since I was very little, had very high ambitions for other things I was going to do as well.
So always ambitious and always wanted to be a change maker. But how did you decide when you were dancing professionally in Swan Lake that you wanted to go off to MIT? And I would say that most professional dancers are not also thinking about MIT at the same time.
That is a fair question. I think I'm the only one in my ballet school that ended up taking the path that I took. I loved math and science since I was very little. So my dad is an electrical engineer. My mom's a math teacher. My sister now did a PhD in math at Carnegie Mellon. So we've been a family of a lot of people that love math. And for me, it was always, I wanted to be the best in ballet, but I wanted to be the best in math and science. And I went to a lot of Olympiads and all of those in Brazil because I wanted to go like do both worlds to the best that I could up until I had to really pick one. And I feel like college was a natural transition. I really wanted to come to the US, and it was like the best universities in the world are here, like all the best companies in the world. It just seems like the place. If you want to go to the best place, the United States was it. And it was a good transition point to me. It was like, let's get the college that I want to go to and do that. And it was good because the beginning of that year, 2014, I was dancing in Austria, Swan Lake season, working professionally there for 6 months. And that was exactly when the results for college came out. And it was a kind of a very organic transition to be like, I'm wrapping the season up. I'm going to go to MIT and get started there. But of course, like, I loved it so much. It was very hard to make that decision, but I definitely think it was the right one.
Do you miss dance at all?
I do, but it's interesting because in my first week at MIT, I went to the Boston Ballet to actually take a class on a Saturday. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror in the first exercise, and I was like, I could see my form getting worse and my technique getting worse and all of those things. And I was so upset. I was like, oh my God, like it's going to be hard to see myself get worse at something I cared so much about, because ballet was never a hobby to me. It was like something I took very, very seriously. So I made the decision at the time that I was just going to fully stop, because it was better to remember me being good and watching the videos that it was for me to see myself getting worse while still trying to like catch up in school and get very good on the math side. So I definitely miss it, but I think I made the right call of transitioning completely out. It's just I don't have the personality that can have a lot of hobbies, if that makes sense.
And what do you do now to exercise?
I just go to the gym and soul cycle, and that's it. I do. That's one thing. I do still need to work out every day because I feel like my brain doesn't work as well if I don't exercise. I think it's probably because I've exercised so many hours for so many years growing up that I just need it. But I try to find shorter things instead of 8 hours a day, maybe like 45 minutes.
Yeah, 8 hours a day, not exactly the thing you have time for right now. So looking at how ballet taught you discipline, delayed gratification, you've now been running this company and really fighting to grow it. It's really taken off in the last couple of years, but you've been investing in it for many years now. How do you think you have evolved as a leader since founding Kalshi? And how's your relationship and your dynamic with your co-founder, Tarek, evolved?
Yeah. So in terms of, I think obviously both Tarek and I, we've changed a lot, right? When we were starting, we were just two MIT kids trying to, figure something out. We were coding all day, and nowadays we're not. But I think what some of the things that changed the most is I think we're both, and me specifically, like more like stable and relaxed about a lot of different things. I think at the start of the company, there's a lot of ups and downs, and even with my background in ballet, it was still like every up and down kind of like knew to how to deal with it. And I think that nowadays we're a lot more stable on good news and bad news. But I think the real change that's helped a lot the company was prioritization. Obviously, I think from everything I've said, you probably realize that I'm a perfectionist. And I've been a perfectionist for many years. And I think at the start of Kalshi, I had a hard time not driving things to 100%, even if they weren't that important. And nowadays, I kind of, instead of thinking about things from 0 to 100%, I think more about like ranking in priorities. And maybe if something's very important and priority, number one, that it's important to get to 100%. But if it's priority number 5, maybe getting to 80% and going back to focusing on number 1 is important. So I think a lot of these things about kind of time management and focus, because as leaders, what Tarek and I spend our time on is what the company is going to be doing the best at. And I think it's almost the most important thing for us to really allocate our time well so that the whole company can go in the right direction. In terms of how Tarek and I split our roles and how that changed a lot. When we started, I would do all the like product and front end coding. He would do the back end coding. And nowadays, how this all evolved is that I run the company internally. So things like product design, engineering, ops, markets, all of that fall under me. And he runs the company more on the external side on things like marketing, regulatory, and all of that. And obviously, we worked together for almost 8 years now, for like 7 years also. 7 or 8, I think it's 7 years. And, it's crazy, everything that we've been through. I think I know him very, very well. He knows me very well. It's just we're very lucky to have, found co-founders that we like and respect and admire so much. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I've heard so much from co-CEOs and co-founders who work closely together that having a partner who's really complementary to them enables them to really push each other. And I was talking to one co-founder that she couldn't imagine doing it without a partner by her side. How do you feel like your leadership styles or approaches are different from each other, complementary?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to add, I think one of the most important things when the company grows is that internally people get way, like, I don't want to say afraid, but it's harder to get true feedback from people that work with you. But having a co-founder, you kind of have that like honesty and feedback the entire time. So you're actually able to improve a lot faster because there isn't this kind of like, like box that people put you in and they're very worried about what they're going to tell you because you kind of had that direct line. In terms of how we differ from each other, the biggest difference between Tarek and I is that I'm very, very, very optimistic and he's very, very, very pessimistic. So for him, he's always like, everything is a very big deal. He's always freaking out and he's like, not freaking out, but he's always like, we need to figure this out. This is code red. Like, we need to do this right now, which is amazing at flagging issues early so that we're ready and prepared for them. I'm very much on the optimistic side. I think everything will work out and we should do more. And then I think where I bring a lot to the table is on the long shots or like things that we really need to try. So, for example, when we decided to sue the government for the election markets that they didn't want to let us do them, and we knew we were right on the law and these markets were very important, it was my decision to do it. I was like, we need to do this. This is very important. But a lot of it was because I was very optimistic that we were going to win and this was going to be massive and really kind of change the direction of the company. But I think it's really like this yin yang in a way of like how Tarek and I are and how we work together that kind of really helps the company go through a lot of like the take a lot of risk when it's needed, but also be extremely prepared for the downside if it's needed.
Yeah, there's so much data, including some I cite in my book, about how the most valuable partnerships are male-female partnerships. And then what you really want isn't all female leaders, all male leaders, but the partnerships. One thing that really distinguishes Kalshi and your accomplishments in the last 9 years is that you really, or 8 years, how many years has it been? 8 years? It hasn't been that many years.
But 29 when we started, so 7 years.
7 years. So in just 7 years, you and Tarek have really helped create a totally new model and take an idea that seemed far out there and bring it to life. What would your advice be to people who have an idea that may seem crazy? How can you advise people to think about doing something that's really going to drive change? When is it practical? When is it not?
Yeah, to me, it's important to take risks because most people I see that they're afraid of taking risks. They're so worried about the downside. They're so worried about what's going to happen if things go wrong. But most of the times people are overthinking it. They're thinking like, oh, if I leave my job to do this, and it fails, it's over. And it's like, no, you probably just get another job and you'd be maybe a little bit behind where you are now. And maybe you won't get one promotion, but and that's kind of the level of it's very easy to trick yourself into rationalizing the fear of taking risk. And I think it's important to just kind of be clear in the open. The best way that I think about making decisions is you make sure you have all the data that you can about the situation, and then you map out possible scenarios, and then you put probabilities into them. And it's funny, it's like I run Kalshi and I do think about probabilities all day. It's true. But I think you put the scenarios like, okay, there's 5% chance that the company or the idea would work. And in that scenario, this is what's going to happen. It's great. There's maybe 50% is not going to work. In that scenario, I'll go back to my previous job or find another job. And when you actually map out the whole like tree, you're going to realize that most of the times it's just not that bad. Obviously, if you're like, there's a lot of financial risk, all those things, it's a lot of other considerations. But I think people, especially women, just need to take more risks and be honest with themselves about why they're not doing it. Because I think a lot of times it's just fear.
Where did you get that philosophy? Was that something you were raised with? Was it something you developed?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a lot of how I was raised. My parents, since I was very little, both with me and my sister, they kind of had this like, you can do whatever you want type of thing. And they were like, it doesn't really matter if it's not about the money, it's not about this, it's about finding something you love, doing a fantastic job, just doing your best at it, and you can do whatever. And I think and then they always supported whatever crazy idea I had, right? I wanted to go move to another state in Brazil to do ballet. They were like, all right, let's do it. And I want to go to MIT. They're like, let's do it. I think they just really respected and trusted what I wanted to do, even when I was very young. And that helped build, I guess, me to respect myself and have more trust in myself, because I kind of like came from my parents in a way. But yeah, and I think in a lot of ways is like I was also very, very lucky, very, very fortunate that a lot of things ended up, even the odds being against me, it ended up working out. So obviously I have a little bit of a biased view of how good it is to take risk, but yeah.
Yeah, it certainly ended up working out. You mentioned that the decision to sue, to be able to have the right to do prediction markets around the election, was very much your decision. That was a huge swing. Why did you want to go that route and decide it was worth doubling down and doing this big lawsuit?
Yeah, it was a mix of how important it was for the trajectory of the company and how right I thought we were legally. So for background, we started working with the government to get election markets in around 2021. And we engaged with them. We did like multiple meetings, comment periods, all these are like long regulatory processes. For over 2 years, we have 3 different processes to try to get this market through. And in the end, what we really realized is that it was a political thing. They were very concerned about kind of like the optics and close to election years of, having this, what if this candidate from this party is down on the odds? Does it look bad? Does it look good? And obviously those for us were terrible reasons to not have the market. The whole point of having a market is that you can bring truth and like data to the world on like the real state of a race, because polls are very, very bad. They're biased. And markets are way better mechanisms to get forecasting data about the future. And it got to a point that the only option we had was always sue the government and we let the courts decide if we were right legally and, that we thought we were, or we just let it go and like focus on other things in the future for the company in the future. The problem is that election markets really are the holy grail of prediction markets. And it kind of proved our point after it. It's just the best use case. And it's the best example of why this data is so important on the biggest event every 4 years in the world is the American election. And we just we really felt like for our vision to come to life, there was almost no way to do it without a market on elections. And of course, at that point, it's like, that's why really understanding the data and mapping out all scenarios is very important. Because at that point, what we did was like, all right, so let's see what's going to happen. Okay, there's this percent chance we win, this percent chance we lose, this percent chance it's a long time, a long period, it's many years. And what's the downside? We really looked at, we're going to get retaliated by the CFTC, who's our regulator. We're going to get delayed on all these things, all these other projects. But at the time, when I put everything in kind of, I was like, it makes no sense to not do this. It's too important. We think we're right. The odds are in our favor, and we need to do it. So we took this big risk. And it was funny because we were having for almost 2 years at that point, every board meeting, we would go in and tell the board, we're working on elections. We're working on elections. We're working on elections. They would always say it's not working. It's not working. It's not working. And then after all this time, they were like, okay, now it's done. We're going to focus on other things. And I just show up in the board meeting and I'm like, well, news for you guys. We are suing the regulator because of election markets and we're going to try to bring them to life. So the board they were against us doing it, but they really trusted us in a way of like, if you want to do it, do it. But I want to make sure you understand what the downside was. But yeah, it was probably the biggest risk and the biggest thing we took as a company. I mean, obviously, with probability, you can never be 100% sure. And of course, we were also some part lucky that it came out on our side, but we were right on the law and it was very important. So
it certainly worked out. And were you nervous in that meeting when your board was like, do you really want to do this?
So I think it was, I was nervous because also I knew Tarek didn't want to do it that much. Tarek was like, at some point, we need to understand that maybe this is just not going to work and move on. And I knew that was very much on me. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do it. If it goes very wrong, it's going to be on me. Obviously, like Tarek and I, we're a unit in front of everyone. So it's like, if we me and him decide we're doing it. We go to the board as like, we decided this. And so I was nervous more like internally thinking like, wow, I really can't fuck this up. But to the board, it was kind of split between us and it was kind of explained between us. The most stressful moment was actually the month where the result of the lawsuit was going to come out. And that month I didn't sleep. I didn't work out. I was just almost like a potato just walking around trying to like handle everything because it was a lot.
So that was your big swing. What is your next big swing? Where do you think prediction markets go next?
We really think that prediction markets will be bigger than the stock market. And I think the reason for that is that what prediction markets are is markets on anything that happens in the future, right? And anything that happens in the future means that anyone in the world will have some opinion about a large number of markets. If you're very into politics, if you're very into music, if you're very into cars or makeup, if you're very into anything, really, you can find a lot of prediction markets that help you gain a better understanding of the future and help you also get exposure to the future. So when you sit at a dinner table, at least I'm not discussing, what are Costco's financials or, Facebook earnings or something like that. I was discussing what's going to happen with inflation, what's going to happen with politics, what's going to happen with, the Olympics, and all of that. And what prediction markets are is markets on real world events. For us, it's about expanding the number of markets, expanding who is accessing it, and also improving the user interface so we can attract different audiences. And going and just growing more and more on the institutional side, growing more on the kind of business side and all of that.
Yeah, well, certainly has had such incredible success, and especially in the past 2 years. Before we let you go, we want a couple of final, just personal questions. You're 29 years old. You're the youngest self-made female billionaire. When was the moment you realized that?
I really, I think it was after we raised the round, and we were going to announce it, that I think someone in our team did the math and then they sent it on Slack and they were like, did you know that this is it? And I was like, I had no idea. And that was already kind of all teed up. So it was after, for us, really, these things, they're all kind of like vanity metrics. It doesn't really, what we care is about like our product, our users, and the strength of the business. The business is going very, very well. The product's good. A lot of users are very, very happy we're growing a lot to use the product. And that's kind of like the round was about how do we supercharge that and not about some valuation and the kind of the personal side of that even less. So it's more, obviously it's surreal to be here because it's surreal where the company is. And it's surreal to see kind of like what every one of us here in the office, like, working many, many, many hours a day, been here for so many years, finally seeing it all come to life and grow.
So even though you're not thinking about it, though, there are all these external forces that are putting your face on the cover of magazines and maybe even the CNBC Changemakers list. Does having this massive success relatively quickly, and certainly when you're very young, change the way you think about your career, your goals, your trajectory?
Not really. To me, it's always about how far can I go and how much I can push myself. So it's less about like one goal of like, I need to hit this. It's more about kind of like this continuous improvement and self-improvement, continuous kind of like how can I get better and go farther and get closer to the people that, I when I was little wanted to be like, which is obviously very, very, very hard to do. And it's more about that, like nothing changed on anything. It's like, to me, it's a very almost like an internal process that like, I want to be proud of myself and I want to push myself to see how far I can go. And of course it's great. I mean, getting people to say great things about me is great, but that's just not what it's about.
So when you think about that list of names on your bedside table, who is it that you think about the most? Who are the names? Is it Alexander the Great? Is there somewhere else where you think that is my aspiration? And now you've met so many influential, famous people who are currently alive. Are there any of them that have had a big impact on you?
Wow, it's a great question. I actually haven't thought about like who I think the most about. I don't know. It's like I'm so far from almost any of them. I'm like at less than 0.1% of all they've achieved. And to me, it's like obviously there's like amazing people out there in the world that I like draw inspiration from a lot of different areas of the world. From like from Taylor Swift to Steve Jobs to a lot of different people that I try to learn from, because there's a lot of amazing people in the world.
So my last question is going to be about life hacks. We ask all our change makers this. You mentioned you have to exercise every day. It keeps you focused and grounded. Are there other things you like to do that enable you to be your best, most productive self?
Yeah, to me, I think on top of working out, the other thing that I really care about is having kind of like time with my family, my fiance, my friends. And with that, it's very hard to do, right? Because you have like, I'm really am in the office like 14 hours a day, but it's like I block times. It's like we have like a date night every Tuesday night. So I just block it in my calendar. It's like a do not schedule. And I try to take it very religiously. I have like yearly goals and I'm like, I need to make it to like 50 out of 52 weeks of, family calls on Saturday, because we do big family calls like for hours. My sister has a baby, so we all hang out or like date night. And I think it's just important to kind of keep myself grounded. That support system when you're so stressed with work is very important to know that, like, again, the worst downside is not that bad, right? I have people I love that support me and love me, and that's the most important thing, and I'm healthy. So kind of blocking time is it's a very good hack that I have to make sure that I'm there and not procrastinate it.
To be intentional with your time. So intention, optimism, and ambition. Luana, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you so much.
One more thing before we go. We hope you'll join us at our upcoming Changemakers Summit, Thursday, April 16th in New York City. We'll be celebrating the inspiring women on the 3rd annual CNBC Changemakers list, with interviews and conversations with the leaders driving transformation and innovation across all sectors of the economy. To learn more about this incredible event, go to cnbc.com/changemakers.